Members' motion with no legislative effect. Mr. Tony Chair will move a motion on actively developing land and optimizing land use to promote the development of the economy and industries. 6 members will move amendments to the motion. This council will proceed to a joint debate on the motion and the amendments. Later, I will first call on Mr. Tony Chair to speak and move the motion. Then I will call upon Mr. Louis Loong, Mr. Stanley NG, Ms. Yuet-ming, Mr. Kwok-fan, Ms. Carmen and Mr. Andrew Lam to speak in sequence, but they may not move the amendments at this stage. The joint debate now begins. Members who wish to speak, please press the request to speak button. I now call upon Mr. Tony Chair to speak and move the motion. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move that this motion, as printed on the agenda, be passed. Article 7 of the Basic Law stipulates that the Hong Kong SAR government shall be responsible for the management, use and development of the land in Hong Kong, and as the land and natural resources within the Hong Kong SAR shall be state property, and for the lease or grant to individuals, legal persons, organizations, or use and development, the revenues derived therefrom shall be exclusively at the disposal of the government of the region. As property surveyor, along with other government officials, I must say that I am very familiar with the relevant laws. However, it's the sector's view that in terms of the government's duties that have yet to be fulfilled, there is room for improvement in terms of promoting development of the economy and industries through land creation. I must say that it's really disappointing. In the past few years, property prices soared to the extent that property in Hong Kong is no longer affordable among the middle class. The main reason is that the government has failed to adopt a visionary approach in planning for the land that we will need in future. In terms of reclaimed land, 25 years after return to the motherland, the size is just 1/10 or less than 1/10 of that before 1997. This put a cap on development potential. In recent years, the property prices have come down, and because of the government's fiscal position, there are views that we should now relax our efforts in land creation and increasing land supply. But I beg to differ, because by the time the economy thrives again, we'll be short of land, and this will limit our future economic development. I'm happy to learn that the current term of government has heeded our views. Instead of adopting single land development approach, the government is now leveraging private market forces in order to increase capacity. That includes issuance of infrastructure bonds and forging partnerships with the private sector. Last week, the government delivered the Policy Address 2024, and on a pilot basis, large-scale land disposal approach will be adopted. They will conduct market sounding exercise. They will also invite expression of interest from potential developers in a bid to expeditiously proceed with development in the northern metropolis. Before that, before 1997, land grants would be given directly to certain developers to help with achieving government's development objectives. But after 1997, because of the Cyberport scandal, the government adhered to the highest bid wins policy when it comes to land auction, without having regard to the future development needs of Hong Kong. In a rather rigid approach, that is how the government works. We've seen a spate of aborted tenders in the recent land auction exercises. I think that we should introduce a mechanism for developers to share the risk of development so as to avoid impacting on the medium to long-term land and housing supply. When the economy improves under the apportionment of income mechanism, the government can also get a share of the income whilst not being subject to criticisms of collusion. In the past, enterprises and investors were deterred by the very stringent conditions in land auction exercises. When it comes to these development projects, it's very difficult to find a land in Hong Kong for major mainland corporations or multinational corporations to set up presence in Hong Kong, whereas in other places, land can be granted quite easily for development. I am happy to learn that in this year's policy address, a pilot industrial park will be set up. Operation plans can be established. This can also help attract investment and capital. The government will also have regard to the needs of respective industries and approve land for industrial uses in a flexible manner. And apart from that, we also need to consider the management and use of existing land parcels. We have good infrastructure support. This is how we tell investors, but we lack implementation details and we don't provide timetables. The so-called greenbelt areas are often heavily vegetated. They're left idle, and there are also acts of destruction of agricultural land as well as unlawful occupation of government land. These are malpractices that are long-standing and yet to be corrected. Some landowners or corporations apply for rezoning of the sites. However, it takes a long time and a lot of resources to go through the process, and this is also an obstacle to the development of the relevant industries. Some government departments and some government officials are quite passive. This is due to the laissez-faire policy that the colonial British government adopted before 1997 in terms of management, use, and development of land in Hong Kong for land lease or grant. Basically, the government relied on the free market. However, a passive government means that the government would not be in control of development matters. Now, 2 years ago, in a key address delivered by Presidency on the 1st of July, the Presidency said that we should leverage on an efficient market and capable government in order to create new growth impetus and be proactive in taking forward reforms. We should break the barrier of vested interests so as to unleash development potential. In a third plenary session of the 20th CPC Central Committee, again, the central authorities advocates further deepening reform. Now, the latest policy address delivered by the Chief Executive John Lee aligns with what Presidency said in his key address, as well as the resolution at the third plenary session. In terms of land and industries, more should be done. Now, in terms of implementation, the frontline personnel in the civil service should also be motivated to do some real work in terms of management use of land and the land grant and approval process. And this is a challenge in terms of taking forward further reforms. I hope that the government will continue to deliver so as to promote the development of our economy and industries. I so submit. I urge members to support my motion.
I now propose the question to you that Mr. Tony TSE's motion be passed. Mr. Louis LOONG. Deputy President, land is a precious resource of Hong Kong. Today's motion is about actively developing land and optimizing land use to develop the economy and industries. We have a consensus on this. I thank the Chief Executive to say in his policy address that the government will continue to remove red tape and streamline land development procedures. The focus of my amendment is the specific measures to be adopted by the government to actively develop and utilize land. We don't just have to utilize land, we have to use it smartly. Let me take this as an example. The government has applied funding for capital work, and in doing so, the government said that it is a waste to develop underground car park more than 2 stories. As a result, they only design a 1-story underground car park. Now, the rule has been relaxed. However, the developer has to build an underground car park with more than 2 stories to be able to build an above-ground car park. And then the individual flat owner has to pay for the utility costs for running the car park. That is not the smart use of land. I think the government should align the requirements to allow only 1 story of underground car park. Now, under the new territories, enhanced new territories development approach, there is an enhanced arrangement on in situ land exchange and compensation. That is to utilize the market strength, the market's force to enhance development. Now, the compensations level should be aligned with the market rate. That's why the government should liaise more closely with the markets to understand how it works. Now, when necessary, the applicants can opt for the traditional compensation approach. In that case, the government can get the premium, and then the operator can get the land it needs to operate. That is a win-win situation. Now, the third example, the government is the largest landowner in Hong Kong. Now, according to a 1983 court precedent, the government's largest landowner status was established. Now, a practice note was issued on this. A restriction was imposed on all leases, including the word house. Now, that stopped the supply of that kind of houses at all. Now, fully profits, this only applies to certain leases, but the government is applying the restriction across the board. Since the government is the largest landowner in Hong Kong and the policy maker, the government should be flexible. We need to be flexible in order to renew our city. We need to adopt a 2-pronged approach. Now, 1 prong, that is the Land Resumption Ordinance Amendment, was passed. However, we need to work on the other prong. We need land to generate revenue. Now, the government is the largest landowner and hence the largest revenue taker in Hong Kong. The government cannot afford to be stingy. According to the Chinese philosophy, if both parties work together, then both parties can make a profit. Now, I support the idea of public-private partnership. I support the motion, and I implore members to support my amendments. Mr. Stanley Ng. Deputy President, I thank Mr. Tony TSE for moving his motion, reminding us that according to the basic law, the land in Hong Kong are state property. Now, the government is responsible for managing and using and developing the land. I support the amendments moved by Mr. Louis LOONG that the government adopt more measures to develop land. My amendments are based on his. The government must take back the initiative in managing land and set KPIs to build up land reserve. To develop, we need to have land, and also they must be usable land. Otherwise, the government would be as the beck and calls of conglomerates. Now, the government should be people-centric in development. I once wrote an article which talked about the land issue in Hong Kong. Today, allow me to elaborate my point. We have land in Hong Kong. Please look at my chart. There is 1,118 hectares of land in Hong Kong. Only 25% of it is developed. There is not a shortage of land. The problem is we are not reasonably utilizing and developing the land. Now, in Shenzhen, they only have 1,986 square kilometers of land with some 17 million population in it. Now, Singapore is smaller than Hong Kong. The per capita living space is 270 square feet. Now, it highlights the delay in land development in Hong Kong. It gives rise to the nightmare of small living space and skyrocketing property prices. Shortage of land becomes a bottleneck of our economic development. Say, for example, innovation technology. This time of the government is determined to increase the supply of I&T land, but we have to wait until 2026. Now, in the coming 10 years, there will be some 3,000 hectares of developable land, but that is just an estimation. In other words, the government is just going along with that estimation. We can't afford to lag behind in terms of development. If we had land, we would have achieved much more. Because of the lack of land, rent is expensive, and a lot of industries cannot grow. For example, residential care homes for the elderly people. There is a lot of land which is underutilized and underdeveloped. We are still adopting the same mindset as in the colonial era. That is, there is more people than land. This kind of backward mindset gives rise to land developer hegemony. Only by increasing and building land reserve and take back the initiative in land management can the government use land to serve economic development in Hong Kong and improve people's livelihood. Madam Deputy, under the leadership of the Chief Executive, the task forces have achieved much. However, there is still much to do in terms of identifying developable land. In order for Hong Kong to scale higher heights, I urge the government to establish a task force to set up KPI for land development and conduct a study on the management and establishment of a land reserve. I implore members to support the motion and my amendments. Thank you. Ms. Yuet-ming. Deputy President, I speak in support of Mr. Tony TSE's motion that is actively developing land and optimizing land use to promote the development of the economy and industries. Now, in the third policy address delivered last week, the Chief Executive mentioned that we are entering the harvest period of the Northern Metropolis. New KPIs were set. I always support accelerated development. Northern Metropolis is the new growth impetus in Hong Kong. That's why I support the motion, and I also focus my amendments on the development of the Northern Metropolis. I hope members will support my amendment. The economic recovery is not as strong as expected. The government is adopting a consolidated fiscal policy to help the government's budgets return to black. The government is controlling the expenditure on capital works each year and save costs by prioritizing projects. I support that, and priority should be given to site formation projects in the Northern Metropolis. In recent years, the property market has slackened. Tenders were withdrawn. We need to support the city's economic development through new development areas. Now, the NDAs have their specific roles. Now, besides the Sentin Technopole, in the west, we have the high-end professional services and logistics node, and in the east, there would be a 1,500 hectare large land for building a border control point economy. Now, there is much opportunity to enhance work-life balance in the new territories. This will also help Hong Kong integrate into the country's development blueprint. In this year's policy address concerning the Northern Metropolis developments, there are two new KPIs. First, by the end of 2024, the government would consult the market on the large-scale land disposal approach. Now, second, in the first quarter next year, the government would formulate these specific recommendations on adopting a public-private partnership model in enhancing employment in the area. Now, I support the government's efforts. We need to accelerate the efforts. Now, I hope that the pilot zone selected for large-scale land disposal can create synergy with the area. Through large-scale land disposal, I hope we can attract businesses and enterprises to set up business in the area. Now, in the market sounding exercise, the government should keep an open mind. We should take lesson from the West Kowloon Cultural District development. The government should be aggressive in giving concessionary lease for leading enterprises to enhance Hong Kong's attractiveness. This will also enhance the development of the SME sector. Now, Shenzhen just announced the BYD Development Center in Longgang. It is 200 hectares large with $20 billion in investments. Now, it includes a factory, a production line, as well as staff quarters and a headquarters of BYD. Now, it shows the determination of the Shenzhen's government in attracting businesses. Second, we should take lesson from Cyberport and Hong Kong Science and Technology Park. I&T development was controversial in Hong Kong. For example, many people criticize Cyberport becoming a land development project only. Now, we need to help businesses lower the operational costs in the area and provide supporting policy to help businesses to transform and upgrade their business and also pursue innovation. In terms of land development, the government must be even bolder to achieve its goals of trawling for talents and businesses and enhance our competitiveness. I so submit. Thank you.
Mr. Lau Kwok-fan. Thank you. Deputy President, I thank Mr. Tony TSE for moving this motion on actively developing land and optimizing land use to promote the development of the economy and industries. This is an issue close to my heart. I've been promoting land development for a long time. For example, Fanning North, Koto North. I actively help liaise with the between the government and the residents, and I also dealt with compensation issues as well as reprovisioning of facilities. Say for NT North, a new center will be built, and again, I help coordinate different parties. So this is the amendment I have. I urge the government to continuously streamline the development processes and expedite the progress of major development programs such as Northern Metropolis to break the bottlenecks in land supply. And the government should also, in adherence to the principle of government-led market operation, strengthen public-private partnerships and actively explore diversified land development modes, including granting land directly to strategic enterprises, introducing the mode of large-scale land disposal, establishing a dedicated organization to consolidate and develop land, and participate in the development of strategic projects. I'm happy to learn that most of these ideas have been incorporated in this year's policy address, such as the large-scale land disposal. There will be 3 such sites, as well as the pilot industrial park. As for the next step, I'd like to further explain my ideas to the government to supplement their policies. For example, there should be supporting measures to help with the operation and management of the pilot industrial park. Now, my suggestion is this. We could make reference to the functions of the Land Development Corporation, and that's the predecessor of the Urban Renewal Authority, which is in charge of urban renewal matters. In the new territories, however, there is a need to consolidate developments. In the new territories, development is not efficient. We've yet to unleash the development potential because of restrictions such as Chotong land, adverse possession, as well as problems with paper-based land title systems. There are problems with clarifying land titles. In the end, we allowed a fragmented development of industries in the new territories. We need consolidation, and that is how this corporation can come in. In fact, we have the land sharing pilot scheme in place, and under the scheme, the government can help resume land and then allow private developers to proceed with development. We also have an enhanced approach in terms of land acquisition. The private developers may acquire 90% of the land, and the government will resume the rest, and that's a remaining 10%. I think this will be more desirable if we work on these improvements. Next, I'd like to turn to another point that is about greenbelt sites. Greenbelt sites exist to protect the environment, but if you turn to the explanation in the town planning ordinance, this is nothing but a buffer between rural and urban areas so as to prevent urban sprawling. Now, I get this. We don't want the development to take place expeditiously in the countryside in the new territories. But then we also want to create a new urban environment in the new territories. Do we still need greenbelt sites to act as buffer between these two sides? I think we should review the arrangement. Finally, only 1/4 of land in Hong Kong is developed. In Singapore, 70% of land has been developed. And we have the perception that Singapore is bigger than Hong Kong, but it's not true. So I urge members to support the amendment so that we can unleash development potential. Ms. Carmen can. Thank you. I thank Mr. Tony Chair for moving the motion on actively developing land and optimizing land use to promote the development of the economy and industries. The crux of my amendment is this. In terms of Article 7 of the basic law, and that the land and natural resources within the Hong Kong SAR region shall be state property, and I believe this bit should be included in the original motion as well. And I also think we should conduct a timely review of the land policy of the government. We should also put in place the objective of benefiting people's livelihood. I think that what the Basic Law provides is a demonstration of the central authorities' trust in Hong Kong, and that is why the SAR government should also fulfill its obligations in the management, use, and development of land. On the 1st of September last year, we passed the legislation to streamline the land approval procedures, and the government has given an undertaking to build a land reserve. According to the latest 10-year land supply forecast, there will be 3,000 hectares of land available in the coming 10 years. According to the policy address, an internal circular has been issued urging government departments to adopt a facilitator mindset in the approval process in order to expedite development. The Development Project Facilitation Office and also the Project Strategy and Governance Office will have their function terms of reference expanded. And after that, they should work on administrative guidelines and rules. For example, in 2004, the Land Titles Ordinance Cap 585 was enacted, but it has yet come to operation. My third point is this: we need to diversify land development so as to benefit people's livelihood. Land revenue is an important stream of income for the government. I think we should look into various modes of land grant approval process so as to meet the target of $33 billion of revenue from land sale. Now, back then, in July, I made this suggestion to the government. We should diversify the policies on land grants and land development, such as public-private partnership. As I understand, large-scale land disposal is the terminology adopted by the government, and this is a good way of allowing private sector participation. Now, yesterday, according to the administration's briefing, in Fanning North, Santin Technopole and Hung Shui Kiu Ha Chun, 10 to 20 hectares of land will be set aside under the large-scale land disposal approach. I hope the government will communicate with the sector in terms of the details. Now, the word reform crops up 41 times in the policy address. According to the government, a joint effort is needed between the government and the community in taking forward development, and I fully agree with that. I hope the developers and investors would also actively respond to the mode of large-scale land disposal. For example, joint ventures can be set up so that a diversified approach can be taken in the Northern Metropolis development. The Development Bureau also reported to us that a corporation will be set up by the government so as to take the lead in taking forward the development of specific industries in the Northern Metropolis. I think we should encourage this effort. All in all, we need to actively develop land and optimize land use, and after passage of this motion, we need a joint effort from the community to take forward development and improve people's livelihood together. I urge members to support the original motion and my amendment. Mr. Andrew Lam. Deputy President, I thank Mr. Tony Chair for actively developing land and optimizing land use to promote the development of the economy and industries. There are 6 amendments to this motion, which shows how important this motion is. Now, my amendment suggests that the government should be visionary in drawing up a long-term plan. It should not take a demand-led approach. We have industries, but we do not have the supporting policies. We have land, but we don't have a land reserve. In the past, Hong Kong created a number of development miracles because of the enterprising spirit of our previous generations and the open and free environment. Now, against the backdrop of asymmetrical development in the world, we cannot sit on our laurels. In the past, we had some major plans, but in the face of short-term public backlash or fluctuations, these plans were put on the back burners. Only when the demand is keen do we take a demand-led approach and begin to catch up. Presidency says that we need to adopt a strategic mindset, and we need to stand by what we believe to be correct. We need land to trawl for talent and also retain talents. This term of government has made a lot of efforts in building a land reserve. I'm pleased to know that in this year's policy address, the government will continue to take forward the Northern Metropolis Development Plan and the Khao Yi Chau Artificial Island Development. However, even if we have dozens of hectares of land, in addition, we're still short of land. We're just a small area in our country, but in terms of development, we are 200 times more than other cities. Whereas for the Greater Bay Area, the total size is 50 times that of Hong Kong, and yet for the GDP is 5 times more. And together, we're in the top 10 position. We can also encourage investment. Now, in the past 10 years, the productivity of the Greater Bay Area has increased by 90%, whereas in Hong Kong, it's only gone up by 3%. So we are lagging behind. In terms of our economic structure, we are positioned to develop the 8 centers. And there are mutual benefits for Hong Kong as well as the Greater Bay Area. In the long run, the Greater Bay Area will continue to develop rapidly, and it will also be the base of I&T development for our country. And this becomes a very important consideration for Hong Kong in terms of land use. We need industrial policies to set priorities for land, for different land uses. We should not be passive and allow applications to come in, and then we allow private developers to leverage market forces and set their own rent or prices for enterprises to come in. In the past, the government has totally relied on market forces, and yet in the medium and long term, the social benefits cannot be reflected in the land prices. So I support the government's efforts in setting up the Hong Kong Investment Corporation so that a more flexible approach can be taken in the profit-sharing mechanism, so as to proactively attract enterprises and capital to set up presence in Hong Kong. I support Mr. Tony Chair's motion and the amendments by other members. I urge members to support my amendment as well.
Undersecretary for Development. Deputy President, I thank Mr. Tony TSE for moving the motion so that we can listen to members' views and suggestions on actively developing land and optimizing land use to promote the development of the economy and industries. Sufficient land supply is key to enhancing Hong Kong's economic and industrial development. The Chief Executive announced the 2024 policy address last week. He made clear that the government remains determined to sustain efforts in land production. We will assess the situation and take forward various projects in a steady and paced manner. It will also benefit society with more land. More jobs will benefit the community and will also enhance upward mobility. So, while preparing for large-scale development, we will provide sufficient land to major industries for long-term development. I have some figures to provide to members. At present, in Hong Kong, for planned industrial land, we have a total of 2,150 hectares. We have been actively creating land and identifying land, including the Northern Metropolis and Kao Yichao Artificial Island. As of May this year, we already have a total of 1,260 hectares. That is 60% of the existing developed commercial and industrial land. We expect the figures to go up further. Latest forecast shows us if the statutory procedures are smooth, we will have 3,000 hectares of spade-ready sites. If we only take into account land whose preliminary use options have been formulated, land earmarked for economic use reaches about 480 hectares. Land use will also be more diverse. Apart from traditional industrial and commercial use, we also have innovation and technology, digital, tourism, post-secondary education, modern logistics, advanced construction, green industries, and so on. So Hong Kong can leverage our advantage of having the mainland as our hinterland and being connected to the world. We can also create new economic growth points as a result. Members mentioned streamlined development procedures and expediting the development is very important. The government has been working hard on these fronts, including the lease modification extension front. Last year, we have a couple of ordinances, that is the Development, Town Planning, Lands and Works Miscellaneous Amendments Bill 2022. It came into operation last September. We also have other ordinances in relation to the extension of government leases. Through this ordinance, we have an established mechanism to streamline the procedures for handling government lease extension. This will provide convenience to industries as well as society as a whole. Just now I touched upon streamlining procedures. This July, we issued an internal circular. We required the relevant bureaus and departments to adopt a facilitated mindset to handle applications. We also request departments to streamline applications and procedures. We are going to roll out dozens of streamlined measures in the coming half a year. I believe Mr. Tony TSE moved the motion not just because he wants to know how much land could be supplied, but also how to develop it and optimize its use in order to achieve the target of promoting the development of the economy and industries. The Chief Executive mentioned in a policy address developing land in a diverse manner. For example, we will introduce a large-scale land disposal approach in our Northern Metropolis, or in the new development areas, NDAs, we are going to establish pilot industrial parks by granting some of the logistics sites to a company established and led by the government. It will be responsible for formulating the park's development, operation strategies, taking up day-to-day management, and attracting business and investment. The policy address mentioned quite a lot of policies in relation to land development. They may coincide with members' views. Just now, I outlined the main points about the land policy. Members may want to put forward suggestions on individual measures. I will listen to members carefully and give a consolidated response. I so submit. Thank you, Deputy President. I will adjourn the meeting at around 8:30. That is after It should be 6:30. After Dominic Chow speaks, I will adjourn the meeting. Ms. Connie Lam. Thank you, President. In Hong Kong, when it comes to land, we can never have sufficient discussion. Development and conservation, they are always conflicting with each other. So we were so conservative when it comes to land creation policy. Lush mountains are the treasure, so we shouldn't be too aggressive in this area. We shouldn't rest on our laurels when it comes to our resources and land development policies. Actually, land policies leave much to be desired. The chief executive said in the policy address that we need to develop ecotourism. I'm going to offer my views. Sai Kung is the backyard of Hong Kong. To develop ecotourism, we do have advantages. Many people in Hong Kong go north to make consumption, so we shouldn't simply rely on the existing travel mode. In Clearwater Bay, there were only few visitors, and the smaller districts in Sai Kung don't see a lot of good enhancements. It is actually not difficult to revitalize the economy. For example, if we allow villagers to build hostels, farms, glamping sites, that is luxurious camping sites, barbecue pits, or to develop ecotourism dozen tours, island tours, and so on, then ecotourism will be phenomenal. But what is the headwind? It is the lack of greenbelt. Many greenbelts are actually private land. Once they are defined as private land, there's limit on development room. We couldn't even have a concrete pavement. For those who are well up in the new territories, we don't have a lot of V-zone actually. Even if there is a V-zone, many villagers will choose to build houses. Yesterday, I heard about a case in which a man in his 70s couldn't build a village house of his own when he passed away. So there are indeed a lot of restrictions of V-zone. Even if we build a new house on V-zone, it is left vacant or idle for a couple of decades. There are greenbelt areas in the vicinity. People can't even construct or erect a path leading to his or her own house. We can apply for rezoning. But throughout the many years, through the town planning procedures, what is the success rate? The yardstick of the town planning board is ambiguous. We don't have a good understanding of the yardstick. Once we have a precedent, we'll have to follow the precedent, so it will be very difficult. We need to develop ecotourism, and before that, we need to provide facilitation measures in relation to land policies. On the policy front, we need to give opportunities for villagers to develop their own land. We need to provide policy support, and in addition, we should consider using country park precincts or fringes. Can we put in place ecotourism projects? The ecotourism market, we shouldn't stifle its development. We have kayaking, water sports in Clearwater Bay. With island tours, it can drive the development of the entire area. It will also drive business development in the transportation sector. It can become an industrial chain in the area. There are no guidelines on placing the kayak in the area. The department issued warnings, so I hope that there will be guidelines to be issued by the department for Sai Kung to develop ecotourism. I also want the government to use government land to have good long-term planning, whether in the council or in the community. There are a lot of good suggestions. I so submit. Thank you, President. Dr. Wendy Hong. Thank you, President. I speak in support of Dr. Wendy Hong. Thank you, President. I speak in support of Mr. Tony TSE's motion. Land is important to our economic activities. Hong Kong is small, we have finite land resources. Because of policy restrictions, we didn't make good use of our land resources. For a long time, land became a stumbling block to the development of Hong Kong. Hong Kong took bold steps to amend ordinances since the current term government took office. The chief executive reformed land policies, and the chief executive mentioned a lot of this area in the policy address. I have 3 suggestions to make. 1, to reform the land approval procedures and mechanism to enhance efficiency. Last year, I took part in reviewing land creation ordinances, totaling 6 ordinances, that is streamlining the relevant policies. The administrative efficiency is low. That is, it is inefficient. Many government officials want to avoid making mistakes. In the policy address, it mentions the government should adopt a facilitator mindset. It should also improve coordination among bureaus. Apart from these directions, I suggest that the government put forward other measures. For example, the government should set deadline or timeline, clear timetable to make only 1 to 2 rounds of amendments. We need a package of measures to enhance approval efficiency. We also need to review short-term tenancy to inject impetus. Say warehouses, car parks, logistics land, they are lent to the industry by way of short-term tenancy, STT. Then they will have to be updated on a monthly basis, but the tenancy is all too short. Planning can only be short-term. It's difficult to enhance the industry development, so it's low value, it's not green either. I welcome the relevant suggestion to I think there should be a longer term of tenancy so that the industry can transform and upgrade. With changes in the economic role, the traditional service industry and manufacturing industry is not up to date. In the industry chain, I call it 2.5 industries. Say the budget sets that we need to develop a cross-bureau development model. Certification, packaging, labeling. The efficiency of the industrial chain is enhanced. Logistics, manufacturing, all these have been integrated. But integration in land use is not allowed, and this stifles the development of land. With digital economy, there are a group of digital nomads in the community. Many cities see new development and new changes. The urban planning of Hong Kong needs to break from the old mold. I so submit. Thank you, President. Dr. Chow Man Kong. Thank you, President. Hong Shui Kiu Ha Chun NDA modern logistics area. They should be they're going to be granted to a company established and led by the government. That is to flexibly drive the development of the relevant industry. I support Mr. Tony TSE's motion when we need to develop new quality productive forces, as well as the amendments made by other members to drive the development of Northern Metropolis. I will also make the following suggestions on the establishment of a pilot industrial park. Tolling for enterprises is one of the major policy directions of the current term government. There are quite a lot of companies on new energy vehicles, so the government should develop the Northern Metropolis and at the same time maintain close liaison with the industry and plan industrial land well. I suggest the ITIB and the relevant bureau choose suitable sites in the Northern Metropolis. It should grant pieces of land to leading enterprises to focus on new energy vehicles by way of direct grant. The upstream enterprises can establish presence in this area. Investment schemes can be put in place to dovetail with the strategic direction. Hong Kong should really break from the shackles of collusion between the government and other businesses. According to a study report of mainland China, in the middle of 2022, 4 of the 10 enterprises come from Shenzhen. The revenue reached some $2 trillion. Just in a year alone, they contributed $406 million to the government. Well, $40 billion or so, rather. 570,000 jobs were created. I drew on the experience of Shenzhen. The administration needs to introduce 2 to 3 world-class enterprises, but we need to provide assistance, tax concessions to enhance their operational scale in Hong Kong. They make contributions in relation to tax to Hong Kong. Hong Kong not only needs to support the development of new industries, we also need to support Hong Kong-based manufacturing enterprises, say food, precision, industrial, bioengineering. Then we can develop the relevant industries in Hong Kong. Apart from new energy vehicle, we also need to give effect to some measures mentioned under the I&T blueprint. Industries include health, science, semiconductor, or even traditional strategic or advantageous enterprises, so that we can have economies of scale in Hong Kong. In the development of the Northern Metropolis, unavoidably we will affect some enterprises of traditional enterprises. In the long run, the administration needs to provide multi-story industrial building to take care of these affected operators. Yesterday, in the panel on development, we asked the Secretary whether it is possible to provide land on Lantau Island. The Secretary said that it is not appropriate to put them on Lantau Island because the south is dedicated for conservation. I think they should think twice. We need to develop new industries, but we should also protect traditional industries. We need to draw for enterprises, but at the same time, we need to draw talents. However, we also need to reprovision the traditional industries so that they can continue to operate in Hong Kong. Thank you, President. I now suspend the meeting until 9 a.m. tomorrow.